Hello, everyone. I'm Raj Changadoo. This is Property Investing 2.0, and my guest today is Darren Williams. Darren is a leading property investor based in the UK in Cumbria. He specialises in the BRRR method of buy, refurbish, refinance, and rent so he can build a portfolio for the long haul. In 2017, Darren had four buy to let properties and managed to double his portfolio in just 4 months. Today, he runs Elite Property Solutions, where he helps people to source and renovate their property deals. Darren, hello and welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks. Thanks for the introduction.
No, no problem. No problem at all. No, I'm glad to have you on with us today, Darren. We want to discuss a little bit more about how you were able to build your property portfolio, the investment model that you've used, really dive into some of the deals and some of the lessons that you've learned. But I want to start with a bit more context about you, go right back to the beginning. And I think we were discussing it before. Your school days was an interesting time because that's where a lot of your entrepreneurial tendencies really started. Tell us about some of the ventures that you're up to back then.
Yeah, a bit of a strange one. So grew up on a council estate, absolutely no money whatsoever. I used to walk my parents' dogs, and that was how I used to get my pocket money, £3 per week. So always sort of grew up knowing that you had to work for your money, which when I look back, it was quite funny because I had friends in school that didn't do anything and they got £5 a week. And then even when we were getting further on in the school, there was people's parents where they got £10 per week for doing nothing, and I was here actually working for £3 a week. So it has sort of drilled it into from a young age that nothing's for free. You've got to work for everything. Now, I absolutely hated school, and I mean, if I could have a tummy ache, I'd be off for at least 2 weeks. Anything that I could make to drag that out, I would do it. I just hated school. Didn't know why. I will touch on this, but I actually didn't find out until I was 29 that I was actually dyslexic. So for me, just being in school, as soon as horrible memories of being told to stand up and read out loud and all, anything, if I got asked to do anything like that, it was just easier to be cheeky and got sent out of the classroom. So just to try and get out of that environment and try and basically not being asked to read and write, which was a bit of a, well, looking back, it was a horrible time, but looking at where I am now, I wouldn't be where I was. But yeah, so in school, hated hated it in general, but always used to sell sweets at school. So luckily, used to get sweets from the local cash and carry. Anything from your little 10p, 20p sweets, used to sell them in school. And then where I made my most money was when Pokemon came out. So Pokemon came out, absolutely massive. If everyone can remember the little Pokemon cards. Now I realised quite early that I could buy a card of someone for £1 and then easily sell that same card for anywhere between £4 and £8. And it is funny, at the time, the Charizard card was worth £20. That was the big golden nugget card, and one of them just sold literally about 3 weeks ago in the UK for £150,000. So if I'd have known to keep hold of that card, because I actually did get one. Now I bought it, I think, for £9 and sold it for 18. So, so yeah, as I mentioned, used to get £3 per week from walking dogs. You also used to wash neighbours' cars and things like that. Now with the Pokemon, I can remember my biggest ever week. I made £108 in a week. So when you look at how much I was earning from £3 per week, to sort of put that in today's numbers, if you were earning £500 per week, it'd be like earning £18,000 in 1 week. So I can remember being this 12, 13-year-old kids earning good money. And I was quite lucky. We'd been on a council estate. My dad had always drilled into me, don't waste your money, save for it. So I used to just put the money into my bank account. And my other half laughs at this of how much of a good saver I am. If you can remember the big super soakers that used to be out years ago, that I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah.
the company's on the go anymore now. But I remember one summer that parents were buying them because we had a really hot summer. Obviously, we didn't have the money to buy one, and it was £46.99, and it took me a full year to save up for it to buy it for the following summer. So I was always quite good at that. When I wanted that in particular item, I could save up for it, and yeah, be dedicated to do it.
That's absolute dedication to be able to plan something that far in advance, that young, of saving up for something that's something that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life, I guess, and it has, I
Yeah,
guess.
I must have been about 10 or 11 for that.
Really,
So it's a young age, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And going back to Yeah, the ventures in school, selling the sweets, selling the Pokemon. I mean, I swear every school had a kid in their year. Everyone can remember them. If everyone thinks about it now, everyone probably still knows the name of the person who was selling the sweets to everyone else. And I'm embarrassed to say it wasn't me, that I didn't have those entrepreneurial tendencies back then. I was the person funding everyone else. I was paying 10p per penny sweet and keeping everyone else going. I paid for your Super Soaker, Darren. I was that guy. And the Pokemon thing, that's really interesting because now, like you said, they're really blowing up right now, aren't they? You know how expensive they are. I think I saw a Charizard card once in my life, and I really wasn't into it that much, but I wish I was because, like you said, how much did you say it went for recently?
I think it's about £150,000, but it was sold in the US, so equivalents to like whatever $180,000.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that's crazy,
YouTubers just bought it. So I think
unbelievable.
previously the one before that had sold for about 100,000. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely silly money when you look at what these collectors pay for these items. And the
Mm.
funny thing on that is, I kept just a small pack of not a small pack, a small amount of cards, maybe I don't know, 30 cards that were in my attic for ages. And when that first Charizard sold for about 100,000, I went back, rummaged through the box, and I can't find them. So I think after 20 odd years of keeping them, I must have given them to, I don't know, maybe a younger cousin. I'm not too sure. I've got two children, so I'm not too sure if I gave them to my eldest when he was really young. I really can't remember what I've done with them.
Hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it, when it comes to that? So, yeah, we're painting a picture here for everyone about the types of things that you're up to, how good you were with money from an early age. How did these entrepreneurial tendencies evolve into getting involved in property then?
From being on a, I was quite lucky. So being on a council estate, when you have nothing, I think it realizes that you value it a lot more. So my dad, so to put it in context, my mum was a full-time carer. Dad was a painter and decorator. Struggled to sort of find work, and it was just my dad, with always being with him, telling me, "Look, if you ever get money, always invest in property." My dad had the option to buy his mum's house. So when I was sort of getting to a teenager, he actually managed to buy his parents' house, and that was the first one. We still lived in rented accommodation. We didn't own our own home, but I'd had it drilled into me. Look, that's the way forward. Invest in property, and sort of build yourself an asset that's going to earn you income forever. So I can always remember going on viewings from quite a young age. It's weird if you know that you like property, when you go to, obviously I'm in Cumbria, the Lake District, but when I go to a city, you just cannot stop staring at buildings. And when you've got that eye that you see those beautiful architect buildings and everything like that, I've just always had that from a young age. So yeah, it came from doing viewings with my dad when he was wanting to get into property, and then managing to actually, well, tried to buy my first property at 16. So from selling Pokemon cards, and whenever I got birthday money, if there was nothing I actually wanted that would actually go into the bank, or I don't know, if I wanted a new computer game, I would buy that, and the rest would go in the bank. But I remember meeting NatWest bank manager at the time. This is back when you actually met bank managers, and
Yeah.
said, "Look, I wanted this property." The property was walking condition, 35,000. Wanted to buy it. The bank manager said, "Look, I'm really sorry, you're too young. You need to come back when you're 18, because you can't get a mortgage until you're 18." Now, in hindsight, with this was well before I was educated in property, I should have got a family member to buy that property and obviously gift it to me, or whatever the best way to do it tax efficient is at the time. Now that property, from me being 16 to 18, went from 35,000 to 85,000. Now, as a 16, 18-year-old kid, who that was more money than I could ever imagine, was absolutely soul
This
destroying.
this is like the Charizard all over again. This is, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
like
just before my time.
that. But wow, so you actually had saved the money and had the balls at 16 to go down to the bank manager and actually have all this discussion. 16-year-old kids are just not thinking about that. Like, the average 16-year-old is not thinking about that at all. Like,
It's funny. My friends have always took the mickey out of me because they say anything that comes out of my mouth is something that's going to make money. So I've had it where we'd over the years. This was after school. We've bought ex used stock from like Argos. We've sold on eBay. We've done the local car boots. We've bought all sorts and tried to sell it. Sometimes it's gone well. Sometimes it's gone badly. But yeah, I've always had the mickey taken out of me by friends to say, God, you're always doing something.
well, it pays, doesn't it, at the end of the day? And at least, like you said, you build up a thick skin just to go, yeah, that's me. This is what I do. And you just get on with it, right?
Yeah. And it is funny when you say that. I've always had a thick skin, and it's funny where you've got a thick skin when you're good at something, but regarding like the spelling and everything like that, I held that over me for so long. And as I mentioned, it wasn't until I was 29 I thought, look, I'm gonna have to try and figure out why it takes me maybe 40 minutes to write a letter when it takes somebody else 5 minutes. And there was an audio book which I recommend everybody to listen to. So it's Neville Wright. The answer is yes. Now, what's the question? And he had it 10 times worse than me. I could read and write. I just found it really hard. He couldn't read or write whatsoever. Kept it tied away, wouldn't tell anybody about it until he was 50. And when I read that, I thought, like, I'll have to try and find out. So I got a test done at 29. And I don't know if you've seen The Matrix, the movie.
Yeah, yeah,
You know the symbols and the letters and the numbers, they
yeah.
all come down. So I went and got the test, and I got the shock of my life when I open up a book. That is how I see letters running from top to bottom. So, and basically they put a yellow sheet of paper, see-through paper over, and then I could actually see the lines going left to right. So it was funny. As soon as I seen that, it was like that weight off my shoulder to say, right, there's actually nothing wrong with you. It's this, and then you can use it to your not to your advantage, but you can get somebody else to do the things that you can't do or that you hate doing.
Do you know what? I want to stay on this for a second because I completely can resonate with this whole situation. So I'm dyslexic and hated parts of school for the same reason. As soon as the teacher started asking pupils to read from the book aloud, my heart would just feel like it was just going to burst out of my chest. I just like, and like it's one thing when you're 7 and 8, people expect you not to be able to read, but when you're 16, when you're 18, I mean, I've never really said this out loud, but I remember going into sixth form, the first day of sixth form into school, and telling my teachers, I got there early, and I go, look, I'm dyslexic. I cannot read in front of the class. Like, you are going to absolutely embarrass the hell out of me if you tell me to do this. And even before that, when growing up, like from about 12 to 16, I would just try and memorize parts of it beforehand. And I don't know about you, but my memory got really, really good from that perspective because I tried to memorize so much. Like I could read slow, like you said, it would take me a while to read it, but I could memorize quite quickly.
I was quite bad because it sounds terrible like you're dwelling on it, but because I wasn't getting the help, I just completely avoided it. So in our school, you went from year 9 to 10 where you got to pick which GCSEs you're going for. So I wanted to quickly drop all languages. So I was only doing French and German. I was better at German than French. And we met with the head teacher and he refused to let me drop a language. And I remember my mum saying, look, he's not wanting to cop out, give him extra English and drop a language. And I don't know why, but they refused. And then as soon as that happened, it was a bit of a rebel. And I just skived as much school as I possibly could just because I wasn't enjoying it. Now, looking back now, it is funny, you meet friends and they say it was the best time of their life and everything like that. I hated it that much. I can't say that. Now, dyslexic's a bit different now. There's probably a lot more support than there was. People didn't know what it was back then. But I avoided it like the plague. So anything I could do to actually get out of it is what I would do. So skiving school, going to friends' houses, anything I could do to avoid being in them certain classes, I would do, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can completely understand that and appreciate that. Just for anyone listening who can resonate with what we're talking about, that book you recommended from Neville Wright, what was it called again?
So it's Neville Wright. The answer's yes. Now, what's the question? Absolute brilliant.
I'm definitely going to look into that myself. So going back to looking at that first deal when you were 16 that you were looking to buy, when did you actually buy your first deal in the end?
So sort of fast forward a little bit, what happened from then was 16 to 18, my deposit wasn't worth anything anymore, which was quite a soul destroying sort of feeling. But again, enjoyed being 16 to 21. Now I actually went to college down at Blackpool. So basically what was happening at the time is Tony Blair was going to turn Blackpool into the Las Vegas of the UK. So I was down at college to do slot technology. We were going to basically learn how to program all the slot machines, write the software, maintenance and everything like that. So I went down, first college course of its time and never been out before. I went down and I was the youngest on the course by far. So I was 16, 17. The next age up was about 21. After that, it was about 26. And then everybody else was in the 30s and 40s. And I remember everyone getting the student loan. Always been told by my dad, do not get bad debt. You don't want it. And the gentleman who was the eldest, I think he was about 48, 3 kids, everyone was getting the student loan, like I mentioned. I just went to him and I said, why are you getting a student loan? Because to me, student loan is pens, pencils. Everyone who I know bought mopeds from them. So that was what a student loan was to me. And I remember the exact words. He said, you'll never get borrowing this cheap. As soon as he said that, got my student loan, and then that was it. I managed to get my first house at 18.
And what was your first property that you bought then?
So we've still got it now. It was a 3-bed family house. Didn't need any work doing to it, which isn't what the BRRR model is. Obviously, I wasn't educated back then, but did get a discount. It was 100,000 and managed to buy it at 90,000. So again, 18-year-old making a nice £10,000 equity profit from a council estate kid was it was quite a big deal at the time. With what I can remember, the feeling of buying it.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I want to get into this model a little bit more. The BRRRR model, I think it's a great investment model that people need to understand, especially if we haven't got infinite amount of money. We want to keep reusing it where we can. So for people who aren't aware of how it works, can you tell us a little bit more about the model?
So in a nutshell, it's where we're going to be buying a property and we've got to add value. So normally the main value comes from new kitchen, new bathroom. Don't get me wrong, we do projects where they do need full new replasters and everything like that. But as a basic, if you just find a property that needs a new kitchen, new bathroom, you can add the value. So I'll try and give examples of one we've done. So we've done a couple recently. The numbers are roughly the same, but both properties were on the market at 75,000. Now, these needed a lot of work doing to them, so we managed to secure them at £50,000. Now, both properties needed a refurb of between 20 and 25,000. So roughly all in, we're £75,000 into this project. We then go to the banks and we say to the bank, look, we've bought this project. Please, can you tell me how much the value of this property is today? They send a surveyor out. The surveyor comes out, he values the property. So the two deals we've done, one valued at 110 and the other valued at 118. So as you can see, the banks have came out and said, yes, we agree. You've added value to this property. They then give us a mortgage on that property for the 115,000. That frees up our original investment, which then we can put into the next deal. So that property has technically cost us absolutely nothing but our time, and you just keep recycling that same pot of cash, put it over into the next deal, the next deal, the next deal. Now, the goal always is to get all of your money out, but please, your listeners, do not be sort of heartbroken if you've got to leave 2 for £10,000 in the deal. It's still not a bad deal when you've managed to get property for, let's say, £10,000.
Well, that's it, because people are skeptical about whether they can. They hear something like that and they hear it's so good, sounds so simple, but it's not always easy. And people think that, oh well, yeah, I'll just add a bathroom, add a kitchen, and we'll up the value. But I'm glad you said that. Look, don't be too disheartened if you leave some money in. There must have been a time potentially for you or people where they got downvalued at the end, or the refurb overspends. Has that happened to you? Like,
Yeah, definitely. So two topics there. One, I do see with people looking to get into property, they'll say, "Oh, I can't find a deal where I pull all my money out," and then they don't do anything for 12 months. I would much prefer that your listeners get a property, even if they've got to leave £4,000, £5,000 in the deal. At least you're moving forward. You're not just constantly looking for that dream deal, and it's what everyone tends to do. They look for the perfect deal. And again, the market we're in, bit of a strange one. We've had a couple of down vals recently, and by looking at the down valuations, I'll do numbers. We bought it at 50,000, spent 15 on it, so with legals and everything, we're just over 65,000 all in. Now, there's a house literally behind us on the market for 98,000, and there's another property that's just come on the market for sale at 84,000, and that one, the 84,000 needs work doing to it, and the 98,000 is just walking condition. So we put a valuation of wanting to achieve 90,000. We think that was a good range to be in. The one at 97 might not sell for 97, so we did the 90, and we got an evaluation of 69. Now, what I think we've been given there is we've just been given all our money back. So they don't want us to make the profit in the equity. They're just wanting us to say, yep, you've invested that money, your money's safe. Now, in that scenario, people will panic. All we will do is we will be on a 2-year deal. After 2 years, we will get the valuation that we want. So the good thing about property, it's one of my mentors always said to me, it's like having a bad haircut, it will always grow out. When the money is tied up in the property, it hasn't been lost. It's still there. It's just tied up in that deal, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. Now that's it. And like you said, just because you get a down valuation one time during this, uncertain time, doesn't mean in a normal time that the next value is going to do the same thing. And like you said, the money's not necessarily lost. Someone told me once that, you know, it's not, the money's not lost until you actually sell or till it's realized, right, at the end of the day. So what it does in the meantime, it's like Warren Buffett says about Mr. Market. Just because tomorrow he says, oh yeah, your property's worth 50K, and then tomorrow the next day he says it's worth 100. It's like none of it really matters until you actually remortgage some money out or you sell it. And going back to what you were talking about in terms of don't be disheartened if you don't get all your money back out and you leave 4 grand in, you leave 10 grand in. Because what are the alternatives? It's leave your money in the bank, which is eroding right now. The rate that they're printing money, money's going down, basically. And other people buy property and are just looking to get a good yield. So I can see why being able to remortgage or pull any money back out, if it's 50, 60, 70% of that money back out, your return on investment is just going to be so much higher than most people's. And like you alluded to, you are learning so much more. You're in the game.
Like you've mentioned, even if you do get a down value, so we got a down value on a property, we put it on we put the valuation down. We wanted to achieve 95, hoping for 90. We got a down value on that one at 68. We went to, again, you've got to start the process again, but we went to a different lender. They sent out a different surveyor and we got the valuation of 91. So you're not stuck with that valuer. So when you do get a down valuation, you can go elsewhere to try again to get the numbers that you think.
Yeah. So in terms of, we talked about a down valuation is a potential way that it's a variable, it's an unknown that can happen. And one of the others I mentioned was a refurb going overspend, because if you go over money, if you spend too much, then you're not going to get, that's more money that you got to try and get out at the end of the day. So how do you mitigate against that potentially happening? How do you look at that?
So what I always try and teach like my mentees when they're looking through getting the first deal is try to think of like worst case what we'll need to be doing. So if you're looking at a property, looks in good condition, but you only want the kitchen and the bathroom to be ripped out and renovated, always think worst case that, right, the walls behind there might need plasters, all the electrics in the kitchen might need replaced. If you can put them into your numbers as a worst case, and the deal always stacks up on a worst case, you're then onto a winner when you've actually managed to get the property for under budget or under your end valuation. So I always try and tell people to always have a plan A, B, and C. Now, what I always mean by this is plan A could be an end valuation of 100,000, plan B is 90, plan C is 80. And I always tell everybody, if you can live with plan C or plan B, the deal is a goer. If plan B or plan C can cause you serious financial strain, or in a big term, if you're doing a big development, put you under, you've then got to ask you, really, could I live with that circumstance? So one of my mentees was looking at doing this. She was going to invest in a project. Someone had never done a development before. She was going to finance it. She was going to sign on the bridging finance. And I said, look, plan A, it goes really well. You guys make, I don't know, £80,000 there. Plan B, it doesn't go well. You've signed the bridging finance. They will come after your house. Can you live with them coming after your house? And as soon as you put it into them terms, she was like, right, not a chance. I wouldn't go to that extreme. So always just make sure you've got your plan A, B, and C. If you're happy with all them, I tell people to go. Now, the beauty of starting with smaller deals, let's say you start with a 2-bed or a 3-bed house. If you calculate something wrong on a refurb, you're probably going to be talking, let's say, £1,000 for the extra work that wasn't factored in. When you start to go on to the big deals, you could easily miss something that could cost £120,000. There was a TV programme where a gentleman was developing flats in Manchester, and the timbers weren't the correct timbers, and he didn't get the correct surveyor out to check the timber, and that was 1.2 million difference. So I always tell people, when they're starting off with property, start with the smaller project and work your way up. Don't have zero property experience and think, right, I'm going to do a 12-block conversion, I'm going to build 10 houses. I always try and tell people to just go one deal bigger than the next, and you can work your way up to doing them big dream projects if that's where you want to be.
I think there's a few good lessons there that you've mentioned, Darren. I want to reiterate for people, because that plan A, B, and C, and can you live with plan C, I think is a great question for people to ask themselves. And that could really help make that decision. If you can't live with plan C, then it's a no-goer. And I think that's a great question that people can ask themselves. In terms of the other side of things that you were just mentioning, slowly going up in deals. So, don't just jump to the biggest deal. And especially if you're doing it on your own, if you've never done anything like that, and you're not partnering with someone else who's never done anything like that, then you don't even know what can go wrong at that point. So I think that's a great lesson for people to learn, that you're just pushing outside of your comfort zone slowly each time, or you're mitigating the risk by bringing someone else in who has done those deals before and does know a little bit more about that. Darren, I want to move on, because I know that you don't just do this on buy-to-lets. You do service accommodation as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so you're using exactly the same BRRR method on service accommodation. Am I correct in saying that?
No. So with the service accommodation, we use a strategy called rent to SA, where
Okay.
we are renting a property off a landlord, and then we are renting it out by the night on the likes of, for your listeners, like Booking.com and Airbnb.
Okay, yeah. So we won't go into the rent to SA side of things, but I will ask, why don't you do the same method on your SA units?
So it's the price. So where we are, obviously I'm in the Lake District. I can drive out of the village I live in, I can turn left and I can head towards the Lake District. A property price that way will start probably minimum 150,000. The deeper I go, you're normally looking at up to £1 million. I turn right and drive the other way, where I invest in, and the cheapest property I've ever bought is £19,000. So the price is huge. So I do rent to SA in that area where I don't want to tie up all my money in a deal. And you've got to think, for BRRR, we need the deal to stack up. We have bidded on properties in the Lake District area, but for instance, there was a flat became available, and we were trying to negotiate a price on it, and it sold for the asking price. So it needed about £18,000 worth of work on the property to gain £1,000 in equity. Because the property market, so it was on, I think it was on for 149,000, but even that property walking condition was still worth 150. So you were getting £1,000 discount, but you had to spend £18,000 on the property to gain that extra £1,000. So that's why I don't use the model for BRR in the lakes. I use it somewhere else. So it's just what you touched on before. It's getting the most return on investment for your money, and we buy in a different area for that reason.
No, that makes sense. And like you said, if you're finding a way for it to work, you don't have to overcomplicate it, right? That's quite interesting. And I want to dive into a little bit of your buying rules a little bit later, because that seems to be one of them. You don't start chasing the wrong thing if you know, right, okay, service accommodation is rent to service accommodation, and the BRRR method, or BRRR, I don't know how many R's there are sometimes,
I think it's
is
American.
used.
England, BRR. Just keep it nice and simple.
Yeah, everyone knows what we're talking about. You use those mainly for simpler buy to lets, and it's important for people to understand that from what you told me before is you don't like to sell any of your units, do you? The one, if you buy them, you don't like to sell them.
I don't think I know how my mind works. And as we touched on earlier, I can save for something for 12 months and hit that goal. So I'm doing all the hard work now, and I know that them investments are going to be worth a hell of a lot more in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I think how my mind works is that if I sold a property now and I seen the price of it in 30 years' time, I'd be devastated. But as I touched on, we are talking to an investor that he just wants to do flips. So I'm happy to work with investors who don't want to hold anything, they want to flip. I completely understand. It's just, we've talked about this before. Everyone's got a different mindset of what's right and what's wrong. Some people love doing flips day in, day out because they want that nice chunky cash. Now, how I see it is that you do a refurb, it takes you time and effort, and then you get the money, the rental income, touch wood, for the rest of your life. When you're doing flips, you've got to be constantly refurbing them properties to gain money. So once you stop renovating flips, your money dries up. If I stop renovating buy-to-lets tomorrow, I still get all my income from all the buy-to-lets I've got now. Now, you can argue who's wrong or right. There's no wrong or right. It's just completely down to yourself of what sort of investment mentality you have to yourself. But
I agree. I mean, like you said, there's no right or wrong. It's just interesting for people to see both sides. And like you said, if if you spend all this time and effort to do a project and then sell it at the end, yes, you get a lot of cash in. You get one bite of the cherry, though, so to speak. I can see and understand both sides. I can see your side in terms of you do all the work, you keep it for the long haul, you keep getting the cash flow that comes in, you get to remortgage money back out, you get capital growth, and hopefully there's some tax benefits there as well that you might not get if you sell straight away. And on the other side, is there ever a time that you think, just to play devil's advocate, because like you said, if capital growth vastly outperforms rental income, then yes, property can grow like over the long term, but not all areas are created equal. People say property doubles every 10 years, but let's just say in your area it might double in 5 years and then not do anything for 10 years, and then somewhere else might take 15 years to double. Do you ever think that, oh yeah, that I could sell this and redeploy that money somewhere else that'd work better for me?
yeah, so two answers. The first one is I see this all the time when the market's hot. This happened in 2012. I was hearing people saying, sell everything you've got. There's going to be a big dip. We're in 2021 now, and that still hasn't happened. So I just honestly see that as gambling, that if you try and time the market, sell your properties at the peak. If the market dips 20%, buy everything again 20% cheaper. I understand that. I just don't think you can do it. Now, don't get me wrong, you do see the odd person that has timed the market. And when you listen to them on like podcasts, they do say, look, it was a bit of luck. They did think it was the right time to sell. The market was as hot as it was going to be. And I remember a guy, he must have been on a podcast. So he had a crane company down in London. He sold his crane company for 9 million just before 2008. Now, he said he had a good inkling that the property and the market and everything was sky high. He bought that back less than 12 months later for £1 million. So when you hear them stories, you can do it. I just think I'd prefer to play it safe. I'm quite bad that people say, God, you're such risk averse, and how are you risk averse? By investing in property, which is such large sums of money. But I don't want to try and time the market, because to me it's just gambling. Capital growth for me is a bonus. I'm not investing for capital growth now. Cash flow is all I care about. If the capital growth comes in the next 10, 20 years, that's the extra bonus. So yeah, in a nutshell, I would never try and time it. But to sort of spin that, if I had a property that had a lot of equity in, and for whatever reason I couldn't remortgage to pull that investment out to invest somewhere else, I would consider selling that physical property if I knew it had a purpose somewhere else. That could be, I don't know, maybe starting a business or whatever, some sort of other venture. But I think there's always a way to get your money out of the deal. So why not just refinance, pull out whatever 20, 30, 50,000 pounds to then reinvest in that another venture, or even just use that as capital, get a second charge put on the property. So I think there's always a way around keeping hold of the property.
No, like I said, there was no right or wrong answer. It's just interesting to hear people's thoughts and things. And like you said, maybe if people try and do that and they don't have an exact method or model or metric for doing it, like you said, I certainly don't. I wouldn't be able to time and know what I was looking for to time that right and get it right every time. Then keep it simple, stupid. So
now, don't get me wrong, there'll be people out there that do not want to hold buy-to-lets because they maybe don't want to deal with tenants and everything. I do hear them, and they just want to keep flipping the properties, keep selling them. But there's no right or wrong answer is the best way to
no,
put
that's it. And it's right for you. And like you said, if someone knows, do you know what, I've been a landlord and I hate being a landlord, then you have just cut out, by answering one question, you have saved yourself so much hassle. What is, Tim Ferriss talks about the one question that can save 1,000 questions. It's like, do you like dealing with tenants, or do you like having those problems? No one likes having those problems, but you know what I mean? Can you handle it? And if the answer is no, then fix and flips are what you're doing, or develop to sell is what you're doing. You solve so many issues with that, and vice versa the other way around. Can you deal with, I'm going to call it the Charizard situation, because that's can you deal with having sold something and then it going up in value 20 years later and live with yourself? If the answer is no, then buy and hold is what you do.
Well, it's funny where I live, and it is on the corner of the Lake District. My granddad, years and years ago, got offered a absolutely beautiful 3-story townhouse, absolutely huge. Now, it was £11,000, and he refused to pay £11,000 for a townhouse. That townhouse now is worth over £500,000, and you're literally talking maybe 40 years ago. So that, if I'd have sold that for £11,000, knowing that it's worth 500,000 now, I don't think it's the right mentality for me.
Darren, I want to move on, and I know you've done a number of different types of projects now, and I asked before about a couple of your buying rules. So buy and hold seems to be one of them. Is there a couple of other buying rules that you have, maybe based on lessons that you've learned from previous projects?
It's a bit of a tough one, this one, because it all comes down to location. So when I'm sitting down with a mentee and they're looking at buying their first ever property, what might work in my area might not work in London. So as a rule of thumb, for people just getting started and they don't know their area, I don't think you could go wrong with saying a minimum of 3 beds, because you get that family home. Now, don't get me wrong, I've got lots of 2 beds. I've got a couple of 1-bed flats because I know my area, but someone just getting started, I think that's quite a good rule of thumb. if you don't know your area, or you're investing, let's say you're in London and you're investing in the north, make sure that you've got someone in the area that knows it really well. That could be a deal sourcer, it could be a letting agent, whatever best knowledge you can get in that area, use it. But as a rule of thumb, for people that are just getting started, start with 3 beds, get to know your area, and then you can look at the market for your 2 beds. Now, again, our area for a 2 beds, we listed 3 properties to rent just a couple of weeks ago, 2 2-beds and 1 4-bed. We got 55 inquiries over the 3 properties, because we know our market, we know what rents, and just build yourself up to that, and then you can widen your net, should we say, to looking at 1 beds, 3 beds, whatever suits your area.
No, I think that's a good bit of advice in terms of units that will always hold their value, always rent, always sell. 3 beds seems to be, no matter whether you're up where you are in the country or down where I am, people can agree with that. Most people seem to have the same consensus. What I will say, a question I will have actually, is how far out of your patch do you operate? How far away do you buy?
So I'm quite lucky that where we are, I don't need to go too far, but I do have properties up in Scotland, so they're about a 4-hour drive. But I've got investors that we JV with from London. So don't be too afraid about buying in different parts of the country. I just tell everybody to make sure you've got everything lined up. Make sure that you know someone who knows the area really well. If you're doing BRRR, make sure you know someone who's got refurb teams available. You don't want to be kissing 10 frogs to try and find that prince through trade. So cut that time out. Make sure you've got a letting agent up in the area. So we're quite lucky, we've got in-house letting agents, so we can sort of keep all that in. Now, I've got a friend up in my area. I met him about 3 years ago now. Now, he's got 400 properties in our area. Now, he started with 40, built his way up to get to 40, then met a JV investor from Germany. So the German investor put the money up, he bought more property. I think he got up to 120. And then he's got a London investor, which he met about 2 years ago, and they've gone from 120 to 400 properties. So yeah, don't be afraid to invest far away from home, but just make sure who you're investing with ticks all the boxes.
Darren, I've only got a couple more questions now before we look to wrap things up. And I want to ask if you've had any particular past failure in business or property that seemed like a failure at the time, but has really helped you get to where you are today. Is there anything that jumps out at you from that perspective?
So luckily with property, not as bad, but failures in the past of buying. So I've always been into buying and selling things. I've lost count of how many times I've bought something, sold it for maybe next to nothing because I didn't know its true value. But again, so to put it in a nutshell, we sold a fruit mixer for £3. Now we got it off a lady who just wanted rid of it for £1. So we bought it for £1, sold it for 3, trebled our money. Didn't realise that even though they were still second hand, they were still worth £60. Them are failures, but they're lessons. We never ever made that mistake again. The next time we bought one for £2 or £3, we sold it for the market value. I've invested in lots of stock in the past that haven't sold. I remember a kid's toy called Bush Babies. They were going to be the next best thing. We were on a waiting list to try and get stock back in for Christmas. I think we managed to put about a £4,000 order in for Amazon to get the stock as well, and pretty much sell them at less than we'd paid for them. So you have these lessons, and you've just got to pick yourself up and move on to the next one. At the time, if you dwell in the moment, it really becomes it becomes tunnel vision. You can't see your way out of the tunnel. But the best thing I can recommend people to do is listen to biographies of, like I said, Neville Wright. You hear how many mistakes they've done. Alan Sugar's book's exactly the same. They'll tell you about every single mistake they've made and lost money, but picking yourself up and keep going. Now, relating to property, I wanted to go full-time in property, and when you're trying to get out of your job like I was, you start to not look at the bigger picture. You start to look at short-term goals. So you want to quickly hit that target of, let's say it's £5,000 per month. I did 2 HMOs. One was a big 5-bed, one was a 6-bed. We could have turned it into an 8-bed, but we didn't want to go through planning. Now, I started both of them projects at the same time, both on bridging finance, which is expensive and you're stuck to a time scale. And we had our builder that we were using. He was lined up to move in on day one. One was a 6-month bridge, one was a 12-month bridge. We were at least maybe 8 or 9 weeks in, and he promised he was going every single week. And after about 9 weeks, he'd only ripped the kitchen out. So one thing I can say is that the stress we put ourselves under for them 2 HMOs, because we were chasing that cash flow quickly, was definitely a learning curve. That everything we do now, because we do nice, simple 3, 4, 5, 6, but just bed houses, we don't put ourselves under that pressure anymore. So looking back, I always tell people they'll concentrate on, I want to be out of my job by 6 months. I want 10 properties by 6 months. Always work on your 12-month goals, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. When you break it down of where you want to be in sort of 5, 10 years, 10 years time, it really takes pressure off yourself of trying to go too big too quick at the beginning. And yeah, I always tell people, just learn to walk before you run. Don't try and run before you walk.
That's a great bit of advice, and I'm trying to think what you might have done differently. Then, like you said, you set yourself almost an arbitrary target of, oh, I need to leave my job by this amount of time. Would you have just slowed the process right down and just gone, right, let's just try and do this part time for as long as I can and get into a secure place first? What would you have done differently?
So in hindsight, I would have stuck with doing just a couple of BRRs, so buy, refurb, refinance. That could be a 2-bed, 3-bed house. I would have still worked my way up to doing the HMO conversions, but because I was that quick to jump in 2 feet, I did 2 at the same time. And as we've touched on, the bigger you go in the deal, you learn. You learn from every single refurb you do. You'll learn something that goes wrong on one that didn't go wrong on the other. So sort of thrown in at the deep end. We did 2 big conversions at the same time, both on bridging finance. It's too many new spinning parts at once. So really, we should have done the 5-bed HMO at the beginning. Once that went well, we learned all our mistakes. Then we should have went on to the bigger one to do the 6-bed all ensuite, rather than jumping in and doing both of them at the same time.
No, Darren, that's absolutely brilliant. I've got one last question for you, and you've probably answered this numerous ways already, but I like to use it as a closing statements question. Is if there was one bit of advice, one tip that you would give someone new to getting into property, what would be the advice that you wish you had?
Um, Probably the one is patience, which people probably won't like the answer to. Is we all want to hit that target quickly. If you can literally be a bit more patient. Now, let's say you're in your job and you're desperate to get out. It's don't even leave your job straight away. Go part-time if you wanted to go full-time into property. Having that extra little bit of patience will take so much pressure. And for the ones that I mentor where they are happy in their job, they're happy running their business, they're the ones that just skyrocket because they make the decisions on the investment of what suits them best, not is right, which is going to make me the biggest cash flow. Because obviously, the higher the risk, the higher reward. So you've just got to be careful of that.
Darren, that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on with us just to hear about your investing model, why you buy and hold for the long run, and for the skeptics who feel like sometimes this model doesn't work, the BRRR method. I believe we've shed a lot of light on it today. Darren, if people want to find you and learn more about you, where can they go?
So on all social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, if you just search Darren Williams Property, that's also my website as well, Darren Williams Property. And yeah, just send me a message or drop me a line.
Excellent. Darren, thanks again, and look forward to catching up again with you soon.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me on.